Do you know that guy?
Greetings, fellow motorcycle enthusiasts. Jed's here, and today we're going to be talking about the 10 best motorcycles that you could own. I'm going to try to make this quick, brief. These are all motorcycles that I've owned, so we're going to run through it real fast and talk about which ones you should get. Number 10 is basically any Suzuki GS. I'm going to say specifically the GS 750 that I had. Some of the pros, it's reliable for its age. It handled the best. It was better handling than the KZ or the CB. It was comfortable. It's a great value for money. You can get into a GS for pretty cheap. If you go on Craigslist or all of Craigslist or Facebook, you can find them for about, 30, anywhere from $300 to $1,000. They did have some issues though, pretty bad stock brakes, and they had a charging issue problem. Stators, regulator, rectifier. So keep an eye out for that. I'll tell you one thing, you really learn how to work on a motorcycle if you own an old GS. And I've owned the 200, 300, 400, 425, 450, 500, 650, and both the twin, which was a GR 650, and the 550, 650 inline four cylinders, and the 750 and the 1100 and 1150. So they're all great bikes. The 750 is what I started on, so you really can't go wrong. They're not the best. They're not the easiest on components, but you know what? It's a great beginner bike, and I can't recommend it enough. If you're looking for a classic bike, get a GS, Suzuki GS. I wouldn't waste on a KZ or a CB. They're great, but I think the GSs are just a little better value. Number 9, the Suzuki B-King GSX 1340. Now, I've had this bike. This is, the naked Hayabusa. Who doesn't like a Busa? Everyone loves Busas, right? Well, I got to tell you, it kind of is a ripoff on the VMAX 1700, but it is a great motorcycle. Very reliable, very low maintenance schedule. It was kind of rough on tires and chains, but, it is what it is. The range wasn't the best. You're looking for fuel at 150 miles or so, but it was fast. Probably close to 180 horsepower after some simple modifications. And if you should definitely want to own a Hayabusa or a B-King or one of these bikes. The 1340cc inline four cylinder, the Generation 2 Hayabusa engine is probably one of the best mills like for inline four cylinders ever made. It's really kind of one of those relics. It's going to be sought after for years. They're uber reliable, and yeah, it's a great bike. And I put about 20,000 miles on mine, and I really liked it. And I think, it deserves the top 10 because that 1340 inline four cylinder Hayabusa engine is quite top notch. All right. Number 8, the Yamaha VMAX 1700. Okay. I had to put the VMAX on this list because I own it, and I really think it's a freaking great motorcycle. It's a Yamaha. It's reliable as crap. It's low maintenance. The valves never need adjustment. It's at 24,000 mile valve adjustments, but they really don't have any issues. It's got 12 pop Brembo brakes that stop the bike just as well as it accelerates with that nasty 1679cc V4 quad cam 16 valve engine. And it's all got R1 components in it. The variable intake, variable runners, the velocity stacks are variable, so it helps with the power creation. It's crazy. You could call it a 200 horsepower motorcycle. It's closer to 170 to the wheel stock, but you can get to 190 pretty easily with some simple modifications. It is just a badass bike, and it's just awesome. The V4 exhaust note alone is half the fun on why you own it. It's a little expensive to get into. There's a good aftermarket, but the aftermarket's pretty expensive. So stock, the bike doesn't have a great range, probably like 80 to 100 miles. It's a little 3.8 gallon tank. You can get a bigger tank like I did, but you know what? It's expensive. Basically, you can get a lot of cool parts for this bike, but look to spend a lot of money, and you can get into it pretty fast. And the 1700s, they stopped making them this year. So expect that price to hold firm. You're not going to find one for cheap, that's for sure. Number 7, the Honda VTX 1800. Okay, so we're going to talk cruisers. The VMAX is a cruiser. So we're going to talk cruisers. And the best cruiser that I could really, I want to put a cruiser in here because everyone likes cruisers. And I like cruisers too, and I probably will end up on one someday, maybe. I've got a VMAX. That's a cruiser, right? So The Honda VTX is a 1795 V-twin water-cooled single overhead cam 6-valve engine. It comes with fuel injection, Keyhine, 5-speed shaft drive. It's super reliable. It's got hydraulic self-adjusting valves. Really, all you got to do is change the fluids out, and you're ready to go for another year. Fluids, brake pads, filters, that's it. It's a simple, easy, great bike. It's a big bike, but it handles pretty well for being a cruiser. Good range, about 200 miles a tank. That's what I was seeing anyways. Very comfortable 2-up. I really enjoyed riding it. My wife enjoyed riding it with me. The only things I don't like about this bike is that it's got some weird tire sizes, so they're hard to find. And those rims like to oxidize real easy. So there's a lot of oxidizing bits. Even the chrome will oxidize and bubble. So keep an eye out for that. Also, the brakes are linked. So when you hit the brakes in the rear, the front is actuated. So it feels kind of funky. So that was my only grievance about it. But all in all, man, if you're going to get a cruiser you want a cruiser that's American made, because they did make this in Ohio. It's a USA made motorcycle. Get into a VTX 1800. It's gonna romp any of the Harleys. It may not be the fastest motorcycle out there. It's got about 90 horsepower, but it's got a lot of torque, and it really has to get up and go. It's a really cool bike. That's why I ranked it number 7. Number 6, the 2008 Suzuki GSX 650F. Now, I put about 10,000 miles on this little puppy. It's a 656 inline 4-cylinder with a dual overhead cam 16-valve, fuel injected, 6-speed transmission with a chain drive, of course. These things are really cool. I think they only made them for a couple years in the US. Very popular in Europe because they're so geared for sport orient. They're just totally geared to be sport toured with. Very comfortable upright seating position. They're great 2-up. They have a fairing, full fairing, and the fairing's functional for wind protection and rain protection. It's not really a sport fairing. It's really designed to keep you dry and warm and comfortable while going down the road. It's just a great little motorcycle. It's easy on tires. Had a great range, about 240 miles a tank. The only things I didn't like about it was it's kind of subpar in the suspension and the brakes. They weren't that great. I had a couple of death wobble instances. They're kind of a rare bike. So that means aftermarket's pretty rare. I mean, it's common in Europe, so you might have to go find some European sites, but expect some additional costs in shipping to get some GV cases or racks or whatever for it. And for a 600, it's really not that fast. It acts more like a 750, almost like my old GS 750. A lot more mid-range grunt, but no real top end. So honestly, the FZ6 is actually a faster motorcycle, and it's a bit flexy. And the cool thing about this bike is it's so much like the Bandit 1250. That you can get a lot of parts for it. And if you're looking for a bike like that, you can just get into a Bandit 1250. They have them all over the place. Everyone has them. They're not that expensive to get into, and they're uber reliable. They're Suzukis. They just do not break. They just keep going and going and going. That's why I really like this bike. And I probably would have kept this bike for a little bit longer, but I was also daily riding my FZ1 at the time. So no comparison, really. I mean, it's the 650 versus the 1000, and the FZ1 is just the FZ1. But it's a cool bike. I'd highly recommend it. All right. Number 5. A Concours 14 Kawasaki. Okay, everyone knows what the Kawasaki Concours 14 is. It's a 1352 inline 4-cylinder, dual overhead cam 16-valve with variable valve timing, Mikuni fuel injection, and 6-speed transmission through shaft drive, tetralever shaft drive. It's not so goodbye shaft jacking. The tetralever shaft drive was pretty unique to the Kawasaki Concours 14. So you get it, feels like a chain drive, doesn't feel like a shaft drive. So it's a full-on sport touring bike. They call it the Fat Ninja for a reason. It's stupid fast. This bike is a 0 to 60 in less than 3 seconds and does the quarter mile in 10 seconds and a high 10-second range. Stock with the side bags on. That's ridiculous. And because it is derived from the ZX14 Ninja, you can put, ZX14 intake, Yoshimura full exhaust, and a tune, and you're looking at 152, 155 wheel horsepower and 170 mile per hour sport touring motorcycle. They are exceptionally fast, but they're heavy. So there's some the thing with me is that they're heavy. The finish wasn't great. It had some redundancies, like it had the TPM tire pressure monitoring system My batteries were always dying in the wintertime, so I couldn't see the readout at all. So my miles per gallon, my tripometer, my odometer, all my gauges, like all my information cluster would be blocked out by this big warning saying my TPMS was low, batteries were low. So that was kind of a bummer. Also had a fob, which worked okay. It worked fine, but in the winter, as when it was cold, it didn't work half the time. So you had to like finagle with the fob or like use a manual key to make it work. So that was my only other grievance with that. Other than that, it was a great motorcycle, about 180 miles to a tank or so. Not the best. You'd think more, but it is a bit thirsty, especially if you do the modifications to it. And it's fast. It's probably one of the fastest motorcycles I've ever had. I've seen 170 miles on the per hour on the Speedo. So it's definitely fast, and the windscreen and the full fairing really helps you protect you from all that wind. So unlike the B-King, which try to rip you off. All right. So number 4, the Suzuki Bandit 1200 Gen 1, 98. That specifically. I'm putting it on number 4 mainly because of value. You know, it's got the 1157 inline 4-cylinder GSXR derived dual overhead cam 16 valve with 6 SAX Suzuki air-cooled cooling system, oil cooling. It's, you know, carbureted, Mikuni carbureted 5-speed with a chain drive. Stone cold reliable. This motor's been around for, you know, almost 40 years now, and it's just a proven motor. Oil cool, simple, awesome Suzuki design. Comfortable 2-up, stock, fast. It was a fast stock bike, quarter mile in the high 10-second range. It's just a true UGM, you know, UJM. It's a true UJM. It just did everything you needed to do. It was great. It was fast. It would wheelie. It had a center stand. It was just easy to work on. It really brought a lot of value to money. If you're looking to get into a Suzuki Bandit 1200, you can find them for like $800. Some of them you can see for like $12,000 to $3,000, depending on how much you want to spend on the thing. My advice is, if you're looking at a Bandit 1200, look for something that's not so beat, has complete plastics. You're gonna spend like $1,800 to $2,000, but this bike will last 100,000 miles. I put 80,000 miles on my Bandit 1200. It was a great bike, and I highly recommend it. There are a couple rear things. It doesn't handle the best. It's got frame flex. Compared to the FZ1 ZX 1200, the FZ1 and the ZX 1200, the tech was a little outdated, and the motor was great. It's very powerful, accelerates really quickly, but there's just better bikes out there, but not really that many better bikes. I would say I would ride a Bandit 1200 to California and back, across the country, no problem. They're just great, and they're very, very robust. Just keep an eye on their torquiness. They like to eat tires sometimes if you're a little too wheelie nuts, maybe 7,000 miles on a rear tire, and they like to blow chains. I've had a few chains snap on me. All right, number 3. I'm going to get some flack for this, but number 3 best motorcycle that I've owned and I can recommend to buy or own or ride yourself is a 2018 or 2016 plus Triumph Bonneville T120. I've got 80,000 miles on this current bike. It's a 1200cc inline 2-cylinder single overhead cam 8 valve. It's got Keyhine fuel injection with throttle by wire, 6-speed manual, a 6-speed transmission with chain drive. Excuse me. All right, so the pros. It's a modern motorcycle. It's easy to ride. Anyone can ride a T120. It's easy. It's so much like my first motorcycle. It's kind of ridiculous. It's so easy to ride, very forgiving, except it stops better, obviously, in my first motorcycle. But it's just a great bike. Comes standard with heated grips and a bunch of stuff like ABS, traction control, wheelie control, USB charging. Also has cruise control as an option from factory. So I opted out and bought cruise control with the T120. So it was under warranty. So I got to tell you, great deal for like $11,000. You're getting into a brand new motorcycle with cruise control and all the amenities that, you know, Goldwings had back in the, you know, late 80s. Anyways, so the fit and finish is is just top notch. There's something about Triumphs. They're just beautiful machines. It's really a testament to the brand that they're at now. They just make beautiful machines. The T120 is no exception. It is just a piece of art that rolls down the road. Great to look at. Want you to ride it. When you look at it, get on it, ride it. You can't get off of it. It's just a great bike. low cost of ownership. They're cheap. It's cheap on oil. It's 10,000 mile oil changes. I do 5,000 mile personally, but you can get away with 10,000 miles or annual because most people don't do more than 10,000. So that's why they did the 10,000. You could do it once a year. So cost of ownership is cheap. 20,000 mile valve interval changes, valve interval checks. I tell you, do the first valve interval, get them done out of the way, and then they're just checks after that. Shim over bucket is just awesome. It's great on tires. It's 12,000 miles or so on tires, 25,000 miles on chains. Strong. It has a great aftermarket support, and they're good on gas. 55 miles a gallon, get 180 miles a tank on 2.8 gallons. It's great. Some of the cons I got to tell you, I don't like the stock wheels. I don't like the stock suspension. I swap mine out. This is why it's number 3. There's some real issues. I've had transmission blown. I had a gear selector shearing. And, the radiator went. So this was all the first year, 20,000 miles or 6 months of ownership. I had 3 critical issues. So it's expensive. So if you're out of warranty, you're going to spend a lot of money on you could possibly spend a lot of money, and it might not happen to you. But it's something to be worried about. If you're going to get a T120, just get it new, get it 2 years and just beat the snot out of it and try to, shake out any problems before you keep it forever. And that's what I'm going to do with this T120. I'm just going to run it until I can't run it anymore. See what happens. The engine is a little underpowered stock, but, with a couple of tunes, TNK with Danielle at TNK tunes, bike runs fine. It runs awesome. So there's no problems there. It's a great bike. The engine's just the royal gem of it all. Like, that engine is great. Makes a lot of power, a lot of torque. It's a phenomenal motorcycle. I'm just going to say it. You may take a little bit of gamble on that 24% failure rate of Triumph. It's not a Yamaha. It's not a Honda. It's not a Suzuki. It's not a Kawasaki. It's not a Japanese motorcycle. But it will do what you need it to do. And as long as I recommend getting a warranty because you might need it. Because if you're stuck without it, you're spending money on that transmission. All right, number 2. A 2004 to 2009 Yamaha FZ6. Yep, that's right. So I personally probably have about 15,000 miles on FZ6s, but between me and all my friends, we've got about 140,000 miles logged on the FZ6s. It's the most experience I have with motorcycles is on the FZ6, and it got on number 2 because it is such a phenomenal bike. I really put it up there because these things just don't break. They're ultra reliable. They're very versatile. And they just run forever. So obviously they're reliable. It's a pro. I haven't seen anyone break down. None of my buddies have broken down that weren't induced by the rider doing silly things. But as for just running down the road, they just run. It's fast for its size. The engine is R6 derived 600cc inline 4-cylinder. So Mikuni fuel injection, and it's just wicked fast. It loves the red line to 14,000 RPM. Horsepower around 12,000. But you know what? It's really fun to just rev it right up to red line 14,000. And it'll still pull up there. It's not going to pull like crazy, but it still pulls, and it's just a fun noise to listen to. It's really good on tires. It's got a big old wide 180 in the rear, which is really big for a 600. So it's really meaty on the rear, so you get a lot longer tire life. So you're looking at 15,000 miles on the rear tires usually. Fronts last around 20,000, just like any other bike. But they're really good on chains, and they're about 40,000 miles. We've had a couple of chains last on these bikes. So if you take good care of your chain and your tires, you're going to have some really good life. The bike's actually relatively cheap to maintain. It's Yamaha, so the valve adjustments are supposed to be done every 24,000 miles, but I don't think I've ever seen one person go and do the valves on these bikes that needed adjustment unless they had over 110,000 miles. And yes, these bikes get over 100,000 miles. And on a 600, that is impressive. But it's testament to Yamaha. It's a great one bike. I think if you're going to just pick one bike for anyone, if someone comes up to me and says, what do you recommend? I've never ridden before. I'm going to tell you should ride a Yamaha FZ6. The reason being is it's such an easy bike to get used to. You don't even have to get past 8,000 RPMs, and the bike handles and runs and drives kind of like a 500 or something, like a GS 500 in power. If you keep it under 8,000 RPM, it's very docile, very controlled, very smooth. But once you get past that 8,000 mark and you grow up and you start learning more and you want to go and rev it up more, You have 90 horsepower at tap, which is impressive because it's a 600. That's more than the T120. So yes, and it's faster than a T120. I would probably, if I was given an FZ6 and told I could never get anything else, I would definitely ride it and be happy about it. It's a great motorcycle, and I think it's just one of those bikes that is so versatile that anyone should just own one and try owning one. They're just great. All right. So number one, the best motorcycle that I've owned, and I think the best motorcycle that anyone could own if you had to choose one bike, was the Generation 1 Yamaha FZ1. I put 75,000 miles on my FZ1, more like 74,000 actually. But it's an R1 derived 998cc inline 4-cylinder dual overhead cam with a 20 valves. So yeah, it's got 5 valves per cylinder. It's a very high flow engine, Mikuni carburation, 6-speed transmission. The bike was really designed by Yamaha to get people into that R1 experience without having to suffer that R1 backache that you get with all the sport bikes leaning over. So when they designed the FZ1, they wanted to integrate as much R1 components and technology into the standard bike and propel the bike, the whole brand into this new performance orientation, which obviously it's been everything but performance since. So the 01 FZ1 got the R1 engine. It got R1 brakes, Brembo brakes in the front, R1 brakes in the rear, and R components for suspension. The front forks are from the R6S. They're not R1 brake forks, but they are pretty good and actually handles phenomenally well. I mean, it's a steel cradled frame, but you wouldn't know it. It handles a lot like an aluminum twin spar frame. It handles just very, very competently. You can load it up with 2 people. You can load it up with gear, and it just goes all day. The engine's great, versatile, has plenty of low end, mid-range power because it's an eliter bike. But then again, if you just chase it, it's got over 125 horsepower, and it moves. It's a fast motorcycle. It's fast. It's just a great bike. I really like the gauge cluster on this bike. It's probably one of my favorites. I just love the clock's display. It's just a versatile, great bike for sport touring and just sport riding or just track days. It's so versatile. It's an FZ. It's a UJM. It's a Universal Japanese motorcycle. It'll do whatever you ask of it, and it's really just a great motorcycle. And it was really at par, like it was the FZ1 versus the Bandit 1200. Like those were the 2 bikes that were pitted against each other. The Bandit came out in 97, 98. FZ1 came out in 01, and it just blew the competition away. And that R1 engine, awesome. And just like the FZ6, 24,000 mile valve adjustments, never needs them. I pulled the engine. When I checked mine at 70,000, and just to check it, 74,000 and 73,000, whatever, and it were fine. So it's crazy. The engineering into the Yamahas are amazing, and it never broke down. That bike's never broke down, never had an issue, never let me down, always got me home every time. So there's something to be said about that. Yamaha FZ1, awesome. And if you were to boil it down and go, Jeds, if you could only have one bike for the rest of your life, what would it be? And I only could choose one. It would be a factory fresh, brand new factory fresh Generation 1 FZ1, without a doubt, because that motorcycle is a huge mileage bike, and many folks have put over 250, 300,000 miles on original engines on FZ1s. That's amazing. I don't think the Bonneville will go that high. I think they'll run into more issues at that point, but not that FZ1. Totally awesome. So I guess if I had to pick straws and figure out what I didn't like about it, fit and finish isn't the best. It's a little plasticky, which means the plastics are brittle and they break. I had an old lady hit my FZ1 when it was parked in a grocery store and totaled it. So that sucked. And then, and it's carbureted, so it's a little cold-blooded, but you can do a couple modifications, get that cold-bloodedness to go away a little bit. You might need to use the choke on the coldest of days, but it's still just a phenomenal bike. Even if carbureted, I'd still take it back. I'd still take a brand new one. If I could buy a brand new Gen 1 FZ1, brand new from Yamaha factory, I would. It's just that good of a bike. And then if you could get into one, you should. They're great. So that's it, folks. Thanks for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed this top 10 best video If you'd like to see more, let me know in the comments below. I can also do some other videos. I think I'm going to do one on the Suzuki GS line. There's just so many great bikes there. I kind of just covered it, blanketed it really fast. There's so many good bikes. I want to talk about that some more. I'll do a video there. I implore you on smashing that subscribe button right now. And if you want to watch more motorcycle-based media, you gotta hit subscribe. Just smash it, watch it. I'll be putting out more stuff. It's winter time. This is what I'm doing. So thanks for tuning in. And remember, there's only one place for motorcycles in life, and that's here at Jed's Motors.